Funding for To the Contrary provided by the Cornell Douglas Foundation, committed to encouraging stewardship of the environment, land conservation, watershed protection, and eliminating harmful chemicals. Additional funding provided by the Wallace Genetic Foundation, the Colcom Foundation, and the Charles A. Freoff Foundation.
Hello, I'm Erbe. Welcome to a documentary presentation by To the Contrary. Our issue is freedom of speech in the internet age. Free speech, free expression, free discussion of ideas in the public square is an American right, proclaimed in the first part of the Bill of Rights. But the public square is a whole new concept, with the internet broadening the public square to include every laptop or cell phone in the world. What can be said and by whom is now a focus of fierce political debate.
The right to freedom of expression is universally acknowledged as a foundational right. Without it, democracy cannot exist, and other foundational rights are consequentially denied to an uninformed, unknowing public. While this freedom is universally acknowledged in the U.S., so are reasonable limitations. Which limits to free expression are reasonable, and who has the right or power to impose those limitations are contentious, complex, and controversial questions. In 1927, Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis wrote, quote, "If there be time to expose through discussion the falsehood and fallacies, to avert the evil by the processes of education, the remedy to be applied is more speech, not enforced silence. Only an emergency can justify repression. Such must be the rule, if authority is to be reconciled with freedom. Such, in my opinion, is the command of the Constitution."
Freedom of speech, in fact, a very robust freedom of speech, is essential for a democracy. As the opening words of our Constitution proclaim, we, the people, have the sovereign power in this democratic republic. We cannot possibly, responsibly, effectively exercise that power unless we have freedom to engage in the most candid, robust, vigorous debate and dissent, including the right to criticize government officials and politicians and their policies.
The questions, who has access to the public square and who decides who has access, are as ancient as human political history. When government and culture were controlled by hierarchies, conquerors, theocracies, tribal leaders, and dictators, rulers with unfettered power strangled the right to public speech. People who spoke out against them were quickly silenced. Let's look back to the 17th century when Galileo's discovery that the Earth moved around the sun and not the other way around was highly controversial. The astronomer's discovery, seen as obvious today and open for scientific discussion, was then considered so heretical, an Inquisition court of the Catholic Church sentenced him in 1633 to life in prison. In American history, we've seen our concept of free speech tested most sedulously in times of war and cultural tumult. During the Civil War, President Lincoln censored newspapers sympathetic to the Confederacy using executive orders. An order issued in 1861 made it illegal and punishable by death to correspond with or give intelligence to the enemy, quote, either directly or indirectly. His administration even shut down newspapers with rebel sympathies, something unthinkable today. The Vietnam War spawned several important Supreme Court decisions on the government's ability to censor speech during wartime. Perhaps the most important case of the era was New York Times v. U.S. The justices ruled the government could not bar the Times and the Washington Post from publishing the Pentagon Papers, which detailed government officials' knowledge the war was unwinnable while sending thousands of young soldiers to fight and die in Vietnam. In his concurrence, Justice Hugo Black wrote, "The press was protected so it could bear the secrets of government and inform the people. Only a free and unrestrained press can effectively expose deception in government," end quote.
It is now my honor to sign into law the USA Patriot Act of 2001.
45 days after the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks, the USA Patriot Act was passed. This gave the government the right to invade protected speech. The government read business records, healthcare logs, and records of internet service providers, all in the fight against terrorism.
Throughout human history, freedom of speech has most often been violated, leading to enormous suppression, especially of anybody who dared to question conventional wisdom, who dared to protest existing power structures, who sought law reform. Fortunately, we now have very strong speech protective Supreme Court precedents that allow those whose speech is unfairly stifled to go to court and to have their rights vindicated.
Limits on free speech allow some otherwise protected speech to be restricted. Government can require citizens to secure advance permits for meetings, rallies, and demonstrations. Permits may not be unreasonably withheld nor denied based on the content of the speech. Only when protest crosses the line from speech to violence can the government intervene.